part of the choice which came out of the modeling 3 days was the voluntary ability to step in and out of these so-called know-nothing states. And it had an immediate effect from day one, both in terms of contaminating in the most positive possible sense, a virus which spread through the group, and inducing other people into the same set of choices. And on the other side, it was amusing to me that there were hardly any questions at the beginning. We had to rebuild the capacity of people to pop out long enough to formulate a question from a third, and then pop back in if in fact they want to assimilate the answer in one of those know-nothing states. What I don't know yet, and I'm going to be fascinated by doing a follow-up in 3 months, 6 months, is there a consistent difference in the speed of mastery of the patterns by those people who used the know-nothing state that they got out of the modeling seminar before they began the official courses from those who did not? And we'll find out in 3 months, 6 months. Do not inform yourself, except insofar as you need to know that this is some body of patterning that you're interested in assimilating. The cleaner you come in without previous understandings, the easier it actually is to take you through a series of experiences inductively, whereby you arrive at your own conclusions. Silly example, historically there's a pattern called six-step reframing, which is discussed in Whispering in the Wind. It's a very powerful pattern. It is ancient and still ubiquitous in its application and effectiveness as far as I know. It's been decomposed, so you use parts of it in lots of other places, which is appropriate. These patterns are initially to be used as a guide for behavior. Once you've mastered them, you forget about them and you use them as needed, driven by your calibration of the requirements of the client in front of you. Now, we don't call it six-step reframing. We call it n-step reframing. What the hell's the difference? Well, n-step refers to the fact that there are multiple ways that this complex interaction could be coded, historically in 6 steps. But through discovery, demonstration, emulation, and finally finding your own style, people who are presented with a series of examples inductively of what was called six-step reframing, with no previous framing, struggle with and in some small way recapitulate the personal history that I had in finding this themselves. They're active explorers, and they decide after the experience of emulating the demonstrations which I offer of where they want to get their attention fixing points, that is, where they wish to create a format, what steps. And the n step refers to the fact that one group may take 9 steps, the other one 4. It's a reminder that modeling, and especially the codification of competencies once they're demonstrated, is a relatively arbitrary mapping. And it will vary by group and individual requirements. And this is part of the whole discovery. Remember the little soundbite. A pattern presented by a presenter belongs to the presenter. A pattern discovered by a participant belongs to the participant. In an ideal world, we would never offer explicit formats. We would induce competency through demonstration and imitation until we could verify, okay, you've got it, you're replicating the behavior effectively. Now, step out to a clean third. What are the points that you wish to put in the guide if you were to attempt to pass this competency through language to someone who wished to acquire it, and you weren't using the discovery process? Every time I present a pattern without a discovery process, I'm robbing the participants of the enormously interesting struggle of finding the pattern in the noise, which itself is a superb exercise in calibration, flexibility, and state management. So, this is the ideal. In modern technological world, time is money, so people want the bottom line. So the presentation tends to proceed backwards from my point of view as a modeler. Present the format, a demonstration to put some specific substance to the outline, and then a supervised exercise using the guide which was imposed. I understand the requirements and time in the modern world. Ideally, you would not do that. You would take the time to do the demonstrations, the inductive learning, and each person would arrive at their own understanding through discovery of what this was. We owe it to applicants to such courses, and they should demand appropriately. If the target is becoming a trainer for practitioner purposes, presenting practitioner programs, we insist on a couple of distinctions, one of which is key, namely the distinction between process and content models. I would recommend that they insist before joining such a course that they look at the list of patterns which we consider the minimum set of patterns that a practitioner course should contain. And to achieve, through experience, competency in that set of patterns prior to arrival. So we can focus entirely on the questions of packaging, platform skills, and then exercise design and the other issues which I think exercises are the heart of all training, the experience itself. If we have to back up to play catch-up with candidates to be trainers because they have not been exposed to some of the minimal patterns in the set that we specify, this distracts and detracts from a focus on what we think trainers should be focusing on, which is not the substance of the patterns. We want to assume an experiential base where they have that already, and the question is, what are the appropriate metaphors, what are the appropriate naturalistic examples, what are the appropriate demonstrations, and in particular, what are the design variables that go into designing an exercise which create the context of the trial and error needed by the practitioner in order to discover how well they can actually implement the pattern that's being involved. So the counterpart of telling the practitioner, don't read anything, is the insistence at the trainer level that they demand from us, which we gladly send, the minimum list of patterns, and they have experiential competency in those patterns prior to coming on the course as a candidate. I'm happy to report that, in part stimulated, I think, by the original design of New Code games and activities, we are getting little eruptions in different places in the world of people who have played with the games enough, are explicit about the design variables, which we identify typically as part of the presentation, and have taken the plunge and have actually designed and tested games which lead to superb know-nothing states, high-performance states. Again, these are poorly defined sets, and they do overlap strongly. It's an interesting conversation about what the differences between the two of them are and what's included in what. Nevertheless, people who have, inspired by their own experience and explicit about the design variables, have created new designs. And so there's a snowball effect happening now. This is very exciting for me. Once I'm convinced, which I'm very close to being, that there are competent people. Michael Carroll has himself generated some superb New Code game activities, which I personally tested, and I find them of the highest quality. There are other people in the world who are doing the same. So once I'm satisfied there are enough people doing that, I'm moving my attention to what I call next code, which is the next recoding of NLP, lowering the threshold in certain respects and correcting certain tendencies I see coming out of the so-called new code. So I'm on to the next code as soon as that's true. To me, there's a sense of liberation. Okay, now there's people generating these things in the world. I don't have to be the keeper of the Holy Grail. Psst, it's out there. Let's have people do it.